So meet the experts, Stacie Porter, Porter Global Security. I've gotten to know Stacie over the year, and I am just super excited to have this opportunity to talk with him about travel and safety and security when it comes to travel, especially in this unprecedented time that we're in. Stacie, why don't you, we have our bios up on the screen, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe one little thing that people don't know about you?
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. Again, my name is Stacie Porter. I'm with Porter Global Security. I've been with that for approximately 2 years. Prior to that, I work with the federal government. As you see in my bio, I have over 20 years of service with the federal government. I started with the Secret Service back in '95. Worked for two presidents, former President Bill Clinton, and also former President Bush. Of course, we all know what happened during 9/11, and that's when Bush created Department of Homeland Security. So with that, I wanted to say, okay, what can I do to make a difference? So I joined the Federal Air Marshal Service, which falls up under Department of Homeland Security. And doing that, I did risk assessments. If you've traveled throughout the United States into an airport, I probably did the risk assessment on that airport. So I have a strong background in the aviation environment. And once I retired from the federal government, I worked a little bit. I'm also located in Atlanta, Georgia. And I worked a little bit as a security manager at the Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport here in Atlanta. I did that for a short stint. Again, it wasn't something I envisioned doing. I wanted to always start my own business. So that's when I started working and created Porter Global Security. And I've been enjoying it ever since. So that's a short bio of me. And I look forward to speaking with you guys more throughout the presentation. Ashley, again, we have your bio. If we can also have you give us a little brief description about yourself as well.
Sure. So, my bio says I'm a brand and marketing strategist, right? But really, I just love working with people of all shapes and sizes and just figuring out how I can help them. What I have found in, since COVID-19 is that has been amplified to the fullest, which I'm so excited about because I've helped people figure out, do they need to pivot with their career because they're not in a career that, that obviously is successful during COVID-19, or companies, right? Did they have full loss of revenue and they needed to pivot to another direction? And so I've just been so excited to be a part of those discussions because with every challenge comes opportunity. And people that know me the most know that I do try and find the positive in every single situation, and also see how it can help benefit the masses, right? I want it to make the most impact. And so I do work for a company, PunchAlert. They are a mass communications and emergency management platform. And what I love about them is that they've actually, we were heavily involved in emergency management, which means on-site with facilities, but they have pivoted to focus more on mass communication right now because what's important is reaching out to those stakeholder groups effectively and efficiently. And so when it comes to communication, that's another big passion of mine, is how are we effectively communicating with our stakeholder groups? How are we engaging with them? And so that was one of the reasons why I also wanted to have this talk with Stacie about this topic today, because I felt like the travel industry, is doing a lot within, their own guidelines to create a safe and secure environment for people to travel to locations. But when it came to travel professionals in the industry, I feel like there's a major loss for them because, they're booking travel and then they're not booking travel, and that's their business. And so I've been trying to also help them, lead through this change and help them pivot and help them see how we're going to come out at the end of this. So that they can be successful. And so I've seen a lot of them become resources. And I also have seen a lot of them work shift within, the industry to help in other ways, which is a beautiful thing. And the one takeaway that I got from that is that, if they weren't able to drive revenue, then they became resources, which, we all need a good vetted resource, especially when it comes to a travel advisor, because we are going to get back to travel and we want to travel safely and securely. And I also want them to make sure that they have everything that they need so that they're educated and empowered to help, help their clients travel again. And so I think safety and security with travel is a very important topic. And with places opening up around the world, I'm excited, to start talking about it and to build people's confidence and trust in the industry and in their advisors. So I'm very appreciative to have this conversation with you today, Stacie, and everybody that has joined us.
Thank you, Ashley.
So thank you. I will share one thing that not many people know about me, and then I'm going to ask you too, Stacie, because I don't think you said it, but the one thing that people don't know about me is I love the motorsports industry. I actually used to race as a race car driver. I raced mini trucks. And so that if I lived another life, that would be my other life. So that's just one little fun fact about me.
All right.
What about you, Stacie?
Well, one of the fun facts for me, again, as I mentioned earlier, I started my career working at the White House with the Secret Service. So I had an opportunity to meet a lot of interesting people. But one thing that stood out for me while working at the White House was having an opportunity to take a picture with the first family. Not only that, to allow my family to come into the White House during the Christmas party. So I have a picture with the first family with my kids, and that was something unbelievable, which my family, they'll never forget. And the pictures that I have is with former President Clinton, of course, and former President Bush.
Wow, that's amazing. That'll be a side conversation, okay? One of these days.
Definitely, yeah, a lot to talk about.
So let's just dive right into it. I talked a little bit about the industry guidance, what they're doing to promote the health and safety of all travelers. Stacie, from your perspective, these are the industry guidelines that they've come up with, create transmission barriers, enhance sanitation, promote health screening, follow food and beverage service guidance, and of course we have the source here and we're going to provide this to you after so that you have this. It's a great guideline for the industry. I just kind of want to hear your thoughts about these 4 different areas and your perspective and expectations really as a security professional.
Yes, thank you, Ashley. Again, number one, as Ashley mentioned, create transmission barriers. Of course, when we talk about airports, you have to look at the infrastructure of the airport. We know that creating these barriers is going to be highly impossible in an airport environment. We saw that with 9/11 when TSA was started. We had to put screeners inside the airport at the security checkpoints. Due to the infrastructure of the airports, you see some airports where TSA, they're just crunched up in there and they're doing what they can to get people through security. So as far as the barriers, as we look at COVID-19, again, every airport is different. No airport is the same. And in order for you to look at these barriers or to see these barriers, you will have to conduct a risk assessment on that. Now, I know some barriers that we talk about is reinforcing hand hygiene, and that's something that we're all doing, not just at the airport, but in our everyday lives. And as far as the hygiene, you can decrease the risk of transmission or respiratory viruses by 50%. Also, you want to look at PPE, the personal protection equipment, such as masks and gloves. Some things they're also looking at is installing physical barriers. That's something like signage, the 6-foot distant rule. Again, when we're talking about the airport, that may work now because the airport may not be as crowded as we normally see. But once travel starts to pick up, how will these barriers look then? I know here in Atlanta, when you go to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, you have various peak times, and trying to create barriers with these peak times, again, you're going to have a lot of people involved in creating these barriers. You also want to look at encouraging physical distancing. Now, even though the airport, they may put up signage and they may put up the voice notifications as you're traversing through the airport, it's also up to us as human beings. What can we do to assist with these barriers as well? And also you want to educate, just educate, and you can't stress that enough. Number two, enhanced sanitation. As I mentioned, we want to continue to use the hand hygienes, decrease the risk of transmission. Also, I know technology is big today. You have all kinds of technology and companies trying to put their information out there, from temperature checks. Me personally, I know I can go on and on about how I feel about the temperature checks, but I know the airline industry, they're looking at going with a touchless or low touch solutions. That's great, but you also have to consider the visually impaired. If someone like me, I can easily walk up to a counter and use my phone and touch this and touch, or scan and do this. But again, when you're talking about touchless or going that route, we have to think of everybody when we switch over to something like that. Promote health screening. Again, something that's also very important when you talk about health screening. So you want to keep in mind, I'm not real big on temperature checks. And again, the reason for that, because so many false positives. So if you're traveling for business and, like most airports, you may have to park a few miles from the airport, hop on a bus, transit over to the terminal. And by the time you get off that bus, who knows what type of temperature, depending on where you live. Like Ashley lives in Phoenix, Arizona, the temperature is in 3 digits out there. So, if you're going to check my temperature and get a high reading and then have me step to the side for another reading, that's just delaying more time with me having to go through the screening process. So again, you have to be careful when you talk about the temperature checks. Also, number 4, follow food and beverage services guidance. I know the big thing for all of us to do is to continue to follow the CDC guidelines. And one of the things that they're looking at doing at the airport, especially before you go through security, is treating all food like they do the liquids now here in the United States. They want all food placed in a plastic bag. That way, they don't have to touch a lot. Again, placing these items in a plastic bag or see-through plastic bag will allow TSA not to, dig through your food, especially if that's something you want to eat. Personally, if you're going to get food when you get to the airport, I would recommend wait until you go through security, and maybe that'll be a little better for you versus taking food through security. So again, those are the my opinion on the 4 pieces that you see right here. As we move to the next slide, Ashley.
Yep.
Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the one thing that what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing across the board is that the local communities, I think I mentioned to you earlier when we were talking, in a previous conversation, I was sitting on, for example, the Greater Phoenix Economic Council webinar they had yesterday just about the hospitality space. Visit Phoenix was there, Arizona Lodging and Tourism Association, and the Arizona Restaurant Association. They are all very, very excited to open back up and are working very diligently to make sure that they have trained on best practices and just, I've never seen the amount of training that is being done to make sure that people are following the right protocols and cleaning right after and sanitizing, and just, I know that they're working very diligently, which makes me happy and definitely builds my trust. And because they know that this is their livelihood, right, Stacie? If they don't clean and if they don't follow these guidelines, then who's going to travel, right? Who's going to have the confidence to travel? I mean, there'll still be people that will travel, of course, but they want to open it up to everybody. Like you said, they want it to be available to everybody. And so I know they're working very diligently, and I just wanted to put that point across. But I also wanted to make it a point to say that it is a shared responsibility, right? All of these things that they're doing their part, right? And we as travelers, we want to get back out there. And we just need to make sure we're continuing to do our part so that everybody does have the ability to travel if they want to. And that's exactly. That's really what
and pretty much policing ourselves. And that's what we have to do as humans. We just have to be mindful of everyone around us, not just, it's all about me, but just looking out for everyone around us so we can get back to some sort of normalcy.
Yeah. Which leads us into, know, some of our questions. You know, we've been getting questions and comments from our clients, and we've listed some of them on the screen, which we're going to go through. And it kind of leads into the first one, planning for life after coronavirus. When will we know it's safe to travel again?
That's a great question, Ashley. And I know that's something that we've all been tackling, and especially the airline industry. Many avid travelers, you know, they may be wondering when is it, you know, safe for them to travel again. You know, I may not have a definitive answer for that just yet, but some places are inching closer to reopening the skies. The decision is ultimately comes down to when medical experts, as I mentioned, you know, as long as we're, you know, continuously following the guidelines of the CDC, you know, that's something that not just, you know, us as travelers are doing. Companies are looking at that. They're listening to the scientists. And one thing we have to keep in mind, you know, flattening the curve. When businesses and local governments think it's safe, you know, to start opening back up, you know, that's when we know, okay, now things are starting to fall into place. So again, may not be a definitive answer just yet, but again, just continue to follow the guidelines of the CDC. What are they saying? What are the scientists saying? And then, of course, as we watch the news or we read the internet, which I know sometimes false information may be put out there, but you want to make sure you're paying attention to your local governments. What are they doing? And that will kind of give you an answer as to what the airline industry will try to follow as well. Again, you mentioned briefly about the hotel meeting you sat on yesterday. So even though hotels and airlines are stepping up to help during the pandemic, travel is likely to resume gradually once travel advisories expire and airlines slowly reintroduce flight updates. So, you know, just continue to monitor that. But one thing I will add to that, as far as traveling is concerned, you have to ask yourself, and I know we're going into the travel months right now, especially with the summer here. One thing you have to ask yourself when you travel, you know, pull up that information as to where you're going. Is it safe for me to go there? What are the numbers at, you know, this specific location that I'm trying to go to? So if the numbers don't match up to what you're saying or how you feel, then it may not be the time for you to travel right now. Not only that, you know, as far as your business is concerned, you know, is it necessary for you to go to this location, you know, for business, or is it something that I can continually do like we're doing right now in Zoom? So those are some of the things that you can ask yourself before you decide to travel.
And so what I'm hearing you say is really it's a risk versus reward, right? You weigh it out personally for yourself. But you also, I think this is a perfect interjection to say how important travel advisors are going to be to help educate you, because they know, you know, the ins and outs of the areas that you're looking to go to, especially the ones who specialize in that particular region or in that particular location. So just make sure that you are reaching out to travel advisors or to a trusted travel advisor as a resource, because they will be there to help you when it's so overwhelming, when you're, you know, you're fighting within yourself because you want to travel, but you don't know where to travel or if it's okay or any of these things, and you don't know where to go. We are going to provide you with some resources at the end of the slides, so we'll give you those links. But I would definitely recommend that you find a trusted travel advisor that you can, you know, bounce ideas off of, talk to, and just get their expertise about, you know, the rules and restrictions of those areas. And then the other thing I would say too is just consider some local travel too. Help boost your local economy.
Exactly.
Because that's super important right now. Everybody's affected, and so if you can, you know, just travel within your own community or within a couple of hours, so that you're also keeping that you know, that money within your own communities, and helping those that have been truly affected. I mean, I was again on that webinar yesterday just talking about Arizona. They were saying something like, you know, 70% of the hospitality industry is not working right now. So just think about that when you think about going for places to travel to. And it might be a little bit safer too, because you're not having to travel as far. Maybe you don't have to stay overnight somewhere, but you're still able to enjoy some of those amenities.
Good point, Ashley. Thanks.
So, yeah. No, thank you. So some more targeted questions that we've been getting. So how do I find out, the latest on cancellations and travel bans? What, from your perspective, Stacy?
Again, great question. There's a lot of information out there as it regards to this. Of course, we're dealing with COVID-19 amongst a lot of other things that's going on here in the United States. But again, because there's so many information being put out, it changes within days, if not hours.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to really keep up. And of course, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but again, we have information at the end of this presentation where you can log on and check, various websites to see what's going on. But the best way to also keep track is to track all State Department regulations and advisory notices. And you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter. And they also have platforms, other platforms that you can check regularly as well. So again, State Department is very important, for you to find out what's going on as far as travel is concerned. As Ashley mentioned, you may want to kind of stay within your realm as far as jumping in your vehicle, but that's hard to do sometimes when you work with a business that require you to travel. So, just make sure you do your due diligence as a passenger, checking out various locations, what's going on, how the numbers looking, as I mentioned earlier. So, again, it's changing, as we're speaking now, we may turn on the news later and something's changed just like that. So what I'm saying, I do apologize up front, but, this is something that we have to be patient with.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of us are very, it can get on and log on and look at all this stuff, and that's fine. Some of us, it sounds overwhelming to do that, right? So again, I just have to point you in the direction of a travel advisor. They will help you filter through all of that noise to get you to and help you make an educated decision for yourself and your family or your business, right? There's corporate travel advisors out there as well that are very good at what they do. So I would just highly encourage you to, if you're fine looking at the resources, do it yourself. But if I would highly encourage you to just at least consult with a travel advisor. So I know everybody's like anxious about flying, right? So how might flying look different, right, post-pandemic?
It's going to look different. I mean, nothing's going to look the same. And, as we, again, read every day, the various changes, you look at the various airlines, Delta, United, American, they're looking at ways of how can we practice social distancing on an aircraft. We've all heard stories of blocking the middle seat or removing the middle seat from an aircraft so we can practice the social distancing. We have to look back prior to 9/11, at one time we can all just drive to the airport, drop off our loved ones and just walk them to the gate. Once 9/11 occurred, of course, TSA was established and you were no longer able to do that anymore. You would see them at the security checkpoint and watch them walk through. But, as we tackle this COVID-19 post-pandemic travel, as I mentioned, I know Delta came up with something the other day, possibly talking about not all aircraft, but some removing or blocking off the middle seat. My only concern with that, when you start doing things like that, you lessen the amount of people you can put on the aircraft. And in doing that, which is safe, of course, because you want to practice social distancing, but now you have to look at the dollar amount. Will that ticket that once cost you $50, will that jump up to $100 because now they're trying to, make profit? So we have to pay close attention to that if they begin to block off the middle seat or remove the middle seat on an aircraft to practice social distancing. So things like that will look different. As far as in-flight services, you may not have that. It may be various circumstances. Is someone having some type of panic attack on the aircraft? So of course the flight crew, or if you have a doctor on the aircraft, may be able to intervene and assist with some type of beverage. But right now, you may not be able to get beverage on the aircraft. You may not be able to have food service on the aircraft. And I know that may be tough for some, especially if you're going from the East Coast to the West Coast or vice versa, or if you're traveling out of the country. But again, because we don't know what's going on with this virus, it's unknown. As I like to say, this virus is like catching the wind with a net. This is something that we have to deal with. So again, things may look or will look different post-pandemic. And again, I think most importantly, when you talk about a airport and you talk about the infrastructure of an airport, it's very important for you to have a risk assessment done. It's also mandated by the federal government when you talk about your larger airports, your Phoenix, your Las Vegas, your Atlanta Hartsfield. When you start talking about your Category X airport, they're required to have a risk assessment every 3 years. Now, when you start talking about your smaller airports like your San Antonio or your New Orleans, your Category 2 airports, those are required every 3 years as well, or frequently if they ask for it. So those are the things that I recommend, and that's for any business that's looking to reopen, to have a risk assessment completed, so you know what security measures that you can put in place. We're seeing that now. It doesn't matter what part of the state you live in, but all of us, as we walk into a lumber store or a grocery store, we're starting to see placards on the floor. Okay, this is the direction we want you to traverse down this lane for your food, and then you have to go down a separate lane. So those are some of the things that we may see at airports. Again, I know it's easier said than done, and it may look fine right now because the travel industry is low. But once travel starts to pick up, how will that social distance and the placards on the floor look? But signage is important to me. The more signage you have, and I know at airports you have the voice commands. This is this direction to get to terminal A, B, and C. So those are some of the things that airports are definitely going to have to incorporate.
So yeah, it will definitely be interesting. I know I've seen pictures of like different seating layouts and things like that where they're flipping them around or creating little boxes. So it'll be interesting. It definitely will be interesting to see what comes out. Angela actually has a very interesting question. I love it, actually. Are there safer times to fly during COVID-19? So like the first flight, to get the cleaner plane, or, on certain days? What do you think?
Again, that is a great question. Thanks for asking that. It's really hard to say what time is the best time to travel. I know a lot of the airline industry, they're using companies where they're coming in, using the defoggers and the disinfectant. And again, they're supposed to be doing this for every flight. So that's something we also have to think about when we start to travel to the airport for, vacation or business. At one time it was an hour and a half. We may have to push that time back. Okay, maybe I need to get to the airport 2 hours beforehand. But again, it's really hard to say what's the best time to travel. We just have to trust that these companies are doing their due diligence by going in, defogging and cleaning the surfaces like they're supposed to. And I know a lot of airlines are utilizing the companies now. I know I had a company reach out to me that would like to partner. They have a disinfectant that's FDA approved, EPA approved as well, that when it's clean, it's on the surface for 28 days. It doesn't affect your clothes. It doesn't affect your computers, anything like that. So I know a lot of companies that use some of the disinfectant. It may be a 7 to 5 day period, but this particular company that reached out to me, which we've been in communication with, their equipment is a 28-day lasting. So that's something to think about. And I know they've been reaching out to the airports. They've been reaching out to various businesses as well. But thank you, Angela, for that question. Great question. But again, airlines do have companies coming out using their defoggers and disinfectants to clean. It doesn't matter what time it is. They're supposed to be on top of this.
For every single flight, yeah. Okay, let me move on to the next slide because I think we pretty much covered that last one too. There we go. Can social distancing exist with passengers traversing through security? I mean, you kind of touched on this, right, with what you said before. But do you think it's possible? Like, is it really possible for them to social distance when it becomes, more impacted, when there's more travel happening?
And that's,
they're big enough. I feel like airports are huge, except for when you're standing in those really long lines at when you're coming into the country. I feel like I've never been more jam-packed before, or like right when you're going through, the security checkpoint.
And that's
the rest of them,
Yeah, and that's the problem that we're going to run into. Again, I can only speak about the airport where I live, Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson Airport, which is a massive airport. And if I were to drive up to the airport right now, it won't look the same as it did last year, June 5th. So again, you know, it may work at the beginning, but when you're talking about the infrastructure of an airport, if I were to go to Dayton, Ohio to that airport, you know, it's a much smaller airport, you know, you may look at, okay, this social distancing may not work here. So it's easier said than done. And again, you know, it all depends on that risk assessment. You know, I can talk at length right now about how this should be done or how that should be done, but until I physically see it, this is how things should be done. I know when you talk about security checkpoints, they have the snake lines, and you know that's when everybody's punched in and they're just going in the snake position to get to the security checkpoint. That may be something you have to look at. Do we, you know, set it up like you have at the grocery stores where you kind of, okay, this is the aisle that you're going to go down, and then you're going to turn and come back this way. So everybody's kind of practicing social distance, if you will. But again, it's up to the human factor. You know, what type of protective equipment are you wearing? You know, are you wearing your mask? You know, do you have gloves? I know TSA, that's also something that they're going to be doing when you go into the airport. You're going to see a lot of the TSA personnel wearing masks as they, you know, deal with passengers on a regular basis. So again, you know, it all depends on the airport. Every airport is different. You know, just because I do a risk assessment on Hartsfield-Jackson, that risk assessment may not be the same if I go to Phoenix Harbor Airport and do that risk assessment. And Ashley, I want to say we may have a couple more questions that came in if we want to pause for that or if you want to keep moving.
Yeah, I went ahead and answered Deborah's question. She had to hop off. She was just saying thank you so much for joining us, for, you know, having this. She's going to watch the rest of it. So, you know, I know you've talked a lot about, you know, can the airports adapt with new security layouts? It sounds like, so what they would need to do is they would need to, you know, reach out to you, do a security assessment, and then you would also come with a whole plethora, I'm assuming, of resources to help them create what the new layout would look like, especially when it comes to, you know, COVID-19 distancing world is what, you know, one of our customers has called it here.
Yeah.
And you've talked a little bit about it, but.
And one thing I will add to that
Else?
now, one thing I will add to that, if you look at, you know, every airport, I don't care if it's big, small, if you look at every airport, parking is their biggest revenue. And what I mean by that, most airports, the parking garage, you know, your hourly parking is right across from the airport, you know, for the convenience. You know, I don't want to park 3 or 4 miles from the airport. I want to park right here, jump up my vehicle and just walk right in. So as a risk assessment, I'm not going to come into your business and say, okay, you need to tear down this parking garage. That doesn't make sense. What do you have in place and what can we use that you already have in place? Now, some things you may, like I mentioned earlier, where they're talking about touchless, you may have to add a few technology pieces, you know, post-pandemic, but for the most part, you already have a lot of security features in place, but what can we do? And again, you know, airports have been around for a while, and we know some are adding on to airports as we all travel. There's always construction going on at airports, or some airports are looking, okay, we need to tear this one down and rebuild. But we also have to keep in mind, we have to use cost-effective ways when we also come in and do a risk assessment. You know, I don't want to come in and say, okay, you know, we need to tear down this entire checkpoint because we have to satisfy COVID-19. So again, you know, are we doing our due diligence as passengers? Are we doing our due diligence as employers working at the airport? And that's what we have to consider when we start to travel.
Absolutely. Now, you and I have already had a conversation about this. Next question: who should be responsible for conducting passenger temperature checks if they are going to go that route, right? Many people have said TSA. I know how I feel about it. I don't think TSA needs another job on their hands, but I would love to hear your perspective.
And I totally agree with you. Again, you know, TSA, they have a lot on their plates, and I know everybody on this call or the Zoom meeting have their own opinion of how TSA is or how they work, but I'm not going to go down that road. But again, you know, when you talk about dealing with prohibited items, do we want to take them away from the things that they're supposed to be doing? I know, without naming airport, you know, I can work an 8-hour day, and if I work an 8-hour day at a specific airport, you know, I may hear over the radio that, throughout that 8-hour day, just on a day shift, if you will, that 5 guns were found in a bag, and no fault. Well, I want to take that back. I'm not sure how that happened, but I always hear the story of, oh, I grabbed the wrong bag. So again, I'm not going to tackle that one right now, but if you're going to pull TSA away from checking for prohibited items, then, what can we say if it's not already happening, things getting through security because you want TSA doing temperature checks. Again, that's above my pay grade, and that is something that's being discussed with the higher up. So, what I'm saying now, I can be overruled by the higher ups, and they may say, okay, we want TSA doing this as well. So again, me personally, I don't think we need to pull them away from what they're already doing.
And you're right. Ultimately it is their decision, right? I would hope that in making that decision, they would also know that they have enough coverage to properly, cover the security checkpoints and also have additional TSA available for the temperature checks if they do go that route.
Yes.
But I'm sure risk assessment, you would give them those options. Say, look, if you are going to have your TSA be responsible for conducting the passenger temperature checks, then the expectation is that there's going to be a certain, you have to meet the requirements, right, of the security checkpoints of how many TSA are there to cover those responsibly, right?
Yes, and one of the things you also have to consider, which they do a fantastic job, with their equipment, they calibrate it. So now that's another feature you will have to do. How often are you, calibrating, if you will, with this equipment that you're using? Because again, you don't want to get all these different false negatives going on, and then, I'm supposed to be in Arizona at this time, but yet I got pulled to the side because I have to go through secondary screening because, hey, you checked in at 97 degrees or whatever it may read. I'm not sure what the number is, but you just don't want to add more to the plate when they're supposed to be focusing on, prohibited items getting through. And again, we saw the various changes already with TSA. They're not going to be touching your tickets. You're going to have to put your food in plastic containers, placing other items within your bag. So now that they have to focus on that, and now you're saying, okay, we also want to add, TSA checking temperature checks. Now let's also add another piece to this. What type of training or what's your background, for you to, and that's not just TSA, but that's, various locations that you may go to. What type of training did you go through? And we know when you deal with a core temperature check, you're going to get pretty much an accurate reading. But when you deal with the surface temperature check, again, as I mentioned, I had to park my vehicle 3 miles away, and I'm in Atlanta, and we know right now, it's in 80, pretty soon it's going to be in the 90-degree weather. But if I live in Alaska, where it may be possibly 50 degrees, now, you have to factor in that. As I was riding in my vehicle, I had the heat blasting. So there's so many different things that you can look at that can come into play.
Sure. And obviously the biggest question is what is the risk of getting coronavirus on an aircraft?
Yes, I am not a scientist. That's not my background. But one of the things I will say from, again, working and having a strong background in the aviation realm is that, because of how air circulates and is filtered on airplanes, most viruses and other germs, they may not spread easily on airplanes. However, the risk of infection on an airplane is low. Travelers should try to avoid contact, especially with sick passengers. But of course, if you're sick, again, hopefully that's on that person to do their due diligence, not to travel if they're sick. Continuously washing your hands as often with soap and water. At least 20 seconds as CDC recommends, and use hand sanitizer. Of course, a sanitizer that you want to use contains 60 to 95% alcohol. So again, when you look at an aircraft, you have to look at the way the air is circulated on the aircraft and how that works. So that's something you have to consider as far as the virus on the aircraft. Again, I'm not a scientist, but I know just doing our part as CDC recommends will hopefully alleviate or keep that number low.
Yeah. Okay, so just a last couple of questions here. Does COVID-19 act or spread differently on planes than it does on cruise ships?
Again, just reading and listening to the various scientists and experts, I would say yes. And the reason why, because airplanes and cruise ships are both enclosed vessels, as we all know that, but they do differ in that an aircraft environment are much more controlled. And the reason why I say that is, as I mentioned, according to the CDC, most viruses and germs, they don't spread easily on an airplane because of how air circulate and is filtered. However, and it's a big however, that doesn't mean that all air inside the cabin is clean. And the reason why I say that, because a person sneezing, coughing, or talking or breathing emits droplets, and that can be transmitted to nearby passengers before the HEPA filter, which not most, all aircraft do have, but the HEPA filter has a chance to catch them. So again, because of the HEPA filter, the air is being circulated, but again, that's not an end all be all. We just have to hope that HEPA filter has a chance to catch people sneezing and coughing. That's why it's so important for us to wear our PPE equipment when we're traveling. It's also important, as they're looking at social distancing. I know we've all seen on the news how they're going to do social distancing on an aircraft, but then, you turn on the news the next day, or someone's taking a picture and you look, there's a full flight, and you may see, a small percentage of people on that flight not wearing a mask. So again, what do you do about that? And it's only a recommendation. So there's really nothing that a flight attendant or a flight crew can do about that, because it's a recommendation. Now, if that's part of their policy, they can, enforce their policies, but I can see a big problem with that as well, because now you're going to have that passenger and that flight crew. Now, if the plane is still on the ground, those doors are open, you call the local PD in on that. But if that plane's up in the air and you're having some confrontation back and forth, I wouldn't tackle that. I would just call ahead, or have the captain of that aircraft call ahead. So once that plane lands, you have the local police department waiting for that passenger that possibly assaulted that flight crew.
So, I hope it doesn't get to that point.
No.
I hope that, I hope that whoever travels, again, going back to that shared responsibility, right? If we all need to do our part, and we're all, I know it might be uncomfortable for some, or you may not believe in it, or whatever the case may be, but we are all in this together. That is a fact. And it's been proven, I've never seen the world come together the way we have and be so connected the way we have. And so it is a shared responsibility. And I know that everybody wants to get back to traveling. They're so excited to do it. Why would you want it to take it to that level? You know what I mean? I'm hoping that we all come out of this just, kinder, more gentle people that, just appreciate life, right? They appreciate, what we've been missing out on the last couple of weeks. The one other thing that I will say about this question here is cruise ships. Cruise ships are near and dear to my heart. I used to work for Royal Caribbean, and they're part of Celebrity and Azamara. And the one thing that I do know about the cruise industry is that, obviously they're majorly impacted right now, along with the travel industry as a whole, but the cruise industry is so resilient, and specifically I speak, about Royal Caribbean because, I know, because I worked for them, that they, will do whatever it takes to make sure that their passengers are safe. I know they're looking at implementing, checks beforehand, and they're going to be very stern if they do find things, which, again, is a whole nother conversation. But I think they are going to do whatever they possibly can to make sure that you guys are safe and secure to get back on those cruise ships. Because I do know a lot of people that are ready to get back cruising again. Some people are scared and will never do it again, and that's okay. But I hope that, they overcome that fear, because I love to cruise. I love my cruise family. I'm treated like royalty, when I go on there, and not because I worked for the company, but because they're good, honest people who just love helping and supporting people. So I know they're just ready to get back and know your name and reach out to you every day and bring you that drink. And so I do know that they're getting rid of buffets, and it's going to be just plated meals. Or if they do have a sort of type of buffet, that they're going to be serving it to you. So they are making a lot of changes there. But I didn't expect anything less from them, because I do know that they are, the industry leaders when it comes to the cruise industry. So little shout out there to my Royal Caribbean family. Thank you for letting me share that. So, and of course, the next important question, right, is travel insurance. And I know we're kind of a little over our 45 minutes, but I think it's an important question. Does it cover medical costs if I get sick abroad? What's your take on that?
Again, I'm sure that all depends on who your insurance carrier is, but when it comes to travel insurance in general, if you bought travel insurance and get sick on your trip, of course the answer is yes. You should be reimbursed for all or a percentage of medical costs related to a particular illness. However, when we're talking about the COVID-19, if you have travel insurance and you contracted COVID-19, your policy will not cover that. I'm sorry to say that, but that's the reason being. Insurance coverage does not extend to what is called named events. And that's a natural disasters, terrorist attacks, epidemics, including the COVID-19, and, all qualify as such. Again, this could possibly change because this is something out of your control, but unfortunately, that's not my call, but this is what's written in their policies as far as the, named events are concerned. And even though we're dealing with this COVID-19, but we've dealt with other natural disasters. We saw 9/11 terrorist attacks, of course. We're dealing with, as far as epidemics are concerned. But, as far as travel insurance as a whole, you should be reimbursed. And I'm sure many of us or some of us on this call probably had trips scheduled. And, of course, we were able to get all of our money back. But again, just looking at the named events, I was told, again, this could possibly change or has changed, but I was told when you're dealing with named events, you may not be reimbursed for your travel insurance.
And so this would be another great opportunity for you to consult with a travel advisor, beforehand, before you get that insurance, before you travel, or reach out, if you're booking your own travel, reach out to the travel insurance company directly to get your questions answered there as well too. I mean, of course, they're going to have stuff written in their policies, which we can all read, but sometimes it's good to call them to ask clarification, just to make sure. And then also that's documented clarification, so that if something does happen, you have that, that information documented from the travel insurance company. So this is an interesting question to me from one of our clients. What do I do if I can't get back into the country? And my first thought is, why did you leave the country if you can't get back? But that's always the case, right? Some people left the country not realizing that it was going to shut down, or maybe a lot of people travel and they have a certain amount of money and they travel to get there and travel to get home, and they can't really change things, right, when they're out of the country because maybe they don't have the funds to do so. My first thought on this, I'll just put this in there, is always, before you're leaving the country, you should always check, right? What is the, you're better at this than me, Stacie, what's the resource that they check to make sure, the travel restrictions?
Again, as I spoke about earlier, you want to definitely have that communication with the State Department. One of the things I did when I traveled during my time with the federal government, I always made a copy of my passport, and I always carried my immunization records. I even do that throughout the United States. I keep that in my bag, and that way, if something were to happen to me or I get sick, they say, okay, he's had such and such shots. They have that information. Or if I lose my passport, I have a copy of it. And the one thing you want to do if you're out of country, of course, you're checking with your insurance company before you leave the country. One of the things I will say, it is a tough question, what do you do? But mainly because there are a lot of reasons why you might not be able to return to the United States after travel. One thing, if you are abroad in the country cities and you get quarantined in the country you're in, the best thing I can say is continue to follow the instructions from the local authorities. But if possible, as I mentioned, ask for help, or you definitely want to know. This is prior to you leaving. you want to know where the nearest embassy is. That's or the consulate. That's so important. Every time I travel out of the country, that was priority number one. Not only that, I always did a recon on my hotel where I would, again, I have a law enforcement background, so I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I did a recon on my hotel. Okay, this is the hotel where I'm staying. So I would pull up that information before I left the country, and I wanted to know where every exit was, of the hotel. I looked at all the different streets in and around the hotel. So once I got there, I had a lay of the land. In the event of emergency, terrorist attack, anything like that, I know which way I need to go. Of course, I'm in communication with my coworker prior to us getting there as well. So we're all on the same page. So the biggest thing for me is continue to follow the information of the country that you're in. But most importantly, if you're from the United States, make sure you know where that consulate is or the embassy of that country.
And I absolutely love to hear that perspective, because I think it's so important to be aware of your surroundings, especially when you're traveling, right? And even to the extent that you go to, where are the fire exits, where, because of everything that's been going on in the last few years, right? It's always good to know and be aware of your surroundings. Where's your exit? Where's an alternative option, right? To get you out of that situation. But hopefully it doesn't come to that point. But it's always important to be aware of your surroundings. And then of course, the other thing I say, to folks that travel is, every place has areas of issues, right? We have it here. I'll go to San Francisco and I may not go to certain areas in San Francisco. That's just the case, right? But you just be aware of your surroundings, be aware of where you are at all times. And then, of course, another great reason to consult with a travel advisor, right, is to not only have the U.S. Embassy or the consulate, but have a contact back home that is, helping you be able to get back if they can. I know travel advisors that do have access to, high levels of security, homeland security that, I'm not saying it's possible, but I almost feel like anything is possible these days with what we've been dealing with in 2020. But, just make sure you have somebody that's a representative for you that, knows of your situation and even has like your travel documents in hand too, because that can be helpful as well. So I know we went a little bit past the time. Thank you so much, Michelle, for your comments about just being great info as I enjoy traveling. And in addition to safety, security is paramount. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Does anybody have any questions? And I did leave you guys the opportunity to unmute yourself. If you want to ask them live, feel free to do so. Or you can put them in the chat as well.
Now, we'll say those of you that are online, if you have any other questions that you don't want to ask now, but you want to ask later, the next slide has our contact information on there again. Feel free to email me or give me a call, and we can also have an offline discussion as well. And as Ashley mentioned, these are also some links and resources that we put in here. Again, this is recorded. We're going to have this information emailed to you guys if you're interested, of course, and you can go from there.
Hello.
Did I? There you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you. We can hear you.
Yes. My name is Qasim Challenger. I'm a retired Army counterintelligence agent. I'm affiliated with or not affiliated, but I know Mr. Porter. We have talked a couple different occasions. I feel that that your diagnosis of what TSA will have to go through is spot on. I do feel like it will diminish the scope of them looking for prohibited items. I think that they're not going to be trained properly or could focus on too many things. I think that this is going to be an ongoing issue for until a vaccination is actually found. And then not only vaccination found, people actually required to take it. I think this is just going to be an ongoing issue. So I guess I'll just skin my teeth because I don't know the correct answer other than training. But I think that looking for or stopping prohibited items and COVID-19 testing has to be separate. I don't think that TSA has I don't think there's nothing against the people that work there. I just don't think that they're qualified or could be qualified to handle both situations. And that's just
I agree. I definitely agree, and that's why I wanted to make that point earlier when I mentioned that. Again, this is definitely above my pay grade, and this is something that I'm not going to have the final decision on. I know this is probably being talked about at length at headquarters level. Again, we know how politics can work sometimes when a lot of folks aren't out there doing the job. A lot of times decisions are made without them actually talking to the folks that are out there doing the job and giving their insight on this is how things should look. Now, I will say if they go that route, you're probably going to have a designated team, not, okay, hey, Stacy, I need you to come off the screening machine and come over here and do this temperature check. So if you're going to allow me to do temperature checks, then you better have that team designated for that. Because the other side you have to look at, where you have TSA who are federal employees, now you're going to have people question if you bring in security companies. Okay, now I don't trust that security company. So again, as you mentioned, it's a tough question. How do we answer that? It's a lot of questions that we may not have the answers to, but as we continue to work together collectively, and hopefully we can come up with the right information.
That's so true. And thank you for, voicing that opinion, because I know that Stacy and I feel the same way. And that's why it will be so important for these airports, to reach out to, Porter Global Security to get the risk assessments to really understand, because sometimes they're just making the decision based off of, what they think. They have a staff and I'm just going to, get the staff to do that part, but they're not thinking about the broader picture. And that's exactly why companies bring in folks like Stacy to do those risk assessments, to give them a broader view on things that they may be missing out on. One thing that I just want to point out here on the links to the resources, we do have a global timeline. This is actually a really neat resource where this company has actually put the openings of the different areas around the country in a timeline. And so you can see it by date. And then of course the industry guidance, that's what Stacy went over. So that's just in more detail there. And then the other one that I wanted to point out was this example of Arizona reopening guidelines for tourism industry businesses. This could be very helpful for people that want to travel, but also it's a great resource for travel advisors as well. They can go here and they can click on certain amenities or certain activities, and it'll give them the guidelines and give you the guidelines of exactly what that state is doing for that particular activity or amenity, or what the restrictions are and what the requirements are. So just some really good resources here to the links. And then of course, as Stacy said, on the next slide here is our contact information. We are over by a minute, but we'll send all this out to you. And is there anyone else that had any other questions before we head out? Stacy and I can hang out for a few minutes.
Stacy and Ashley.
Oh, hello.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hi, this is Ivan Williams. Stacy and I are really good friends. I met Stacy when I was in Atlanta. And I just wanted to comment. I guess my concern would be when it comes to Americans. I mean, we're kind of a special breed, right? When it comes to our personal rights, right? So,
yes.
I mean, we've all seen in the news, people, for example, going to a grocery store, and some people had a problem with putting on a mask and going into a grocery store, and meeting that requirement. So my concern is going to an airport,
Mm-hmm.
who is going to be put in place to enforce the 6-foot rule or whatever distancing or any other rules that pertain to this, you know. To me, that's going to be a problem.
And you're absolutely right, Ivan. I totally agree. Again, it may look good now because it's not as crowded or busy, and we know how Atlanta is. They have, they have dignitaries all throughout the airport. Okay, this way to the checkpoint, this way to that checkpoint. However, what happens now when we get back to some normalcy and you have everybody wanting to travel? As I'm walking down the hall, I'm passing you, you're passing me. Now, as we go to the checkpoint, okay, this person has a mask on, but this person doesn't. So again, they're all recommendations, but until there's some type of policy or guideline put in place, what do we do? And even if you do have those guidelines put in place, as you mentioned, do you pull law enforcement away from their duties that they're doing at the airport to possibly tackle, hey, you're not 6 feet from, this person. So again, a lot of these questions are tough questions. It's hard to answer. And I'm sure many of you have done webinars or sat in on webinars where it's the same thing. How do we even tackle this? Where do we start? Where do we go? I know we have to start somewhere, but what do we do about it?
Well, and I'm hopeful that having conversations like this and more of them to drown out some of the media noise, because I feel like media, has their own agenda at times. And so it'll be so important for us to continue having these conversations so that the powers that be, if you will, right, that are above our pay grade, Stacie, will hear our concerns and will have answers, for those and solid answers, and the right folks in there that will help keep the peace, right? Because ultimately, that's what everybody wants. We want to keep the peace. We want everybody to be able to travel and travel safely. And so it'll be important. And again, going back to that shared responsibility. I know I'm always the one in the room that tries to bring the positivity, but it's because I have hope. I have hope that we will all treat each other kindly and with respect. And that's just, that's my hope anyways. And Michelle, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Yes, I was going to say I agree with everything that you all are saying. And it is my hope as well that we could somehow get to the powers that be, maybe, the CEO of some of these airlines, and just like some of the stores that have mandated that you cannot enter their store without a mask, that they start, implementing that from the top down. And so that you don't have those challenges going through security or anything, because it becomes the norm. It is, if you come to the airport, you will not be able to get through unless you are using the proper PPEs. I don't think that it's fair to put that on the employees, because, there's already confrontations with, just the simple things that they already have in place. And so this is really, really important that people recognize. And I think Stacy said it best when he started out saying education, education, education. I'm a safety instructor, and it's very difficult to get people to understand that the PPEs are designed to save your life. We're talking life and death here. And so right now, we're at a critical point, because we're seeing, the numbers have not decreased as they would want us to believe. They had to say what they had to say to get businesses opening, but we're still seeing large numbers of people dying. The numbers we'll see the difference when there's like 0 people dying. And then we'll know that, maybe, we've kind of crossed that bridge. But right now, I think the fact that this is still a pretty liquid situation where we're still learning about it, and there's probably still going to be some new things on the horizon, that we have to take the necessary precautions. So thank you all for, providing this time of, discussion, but we have to continue with these types of discussions.
Oh, you're welcome, Michelle. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Michelle. It is about continuing this conversation. And I know, Stacie and myself and you, we're going to continue voicing that opinion, right? We all have a network of professionals at different levels if we just continue voicing that opinion, because the point is we all want to get back to traveling. We all want to, you know, for me, people that know me know that that I have like aviation fuel running through my veins, right? I've traveled my entire life. And so for me to not be able to travel, and me to be a very positive person, it's even weighing on me. So I can't even imagine, you know, how heavy it's weighing on others. And I would hope that people would take that into consideration, that, you know, they're preventing every single person the ability to travel. Of course, they're, you know, they'll have the opportunity to travel if they want to, but some aren't going to be willing to take that risk, you know, if they don't feel safe. And so the message that I want to portray is let's make it safe for everybody to travel if they want to, right?
Well said, Ashley. Thank you so much.
So thank you, everybody, you know, truly for being a part of this. Help us continue the conversation in your networks with your folks. Just, you know, spread the message about what travel is going to look like, and just have those open conversations, and just make everybody, you know, aware that we want to make it safe for everybody to travel. And of course, if you have any questions, do not ever hesitate to reach out to either myself or Stacy. We're happy to hop on a call with you. You know, if you try and call us and we don't answer right away, you know, that's my mobile number up there. Text me, because I'm on the phone pretty much all the time. I feel like text message is the best way to reach me quickly. Stacy, is that, I don't know, is that your mobile number as well?
Yeah, that's all my correct information. If anybody wants to reach out, again, the 703 is the number, and there's my webpage and my email address as well. So again, don't hesitate to reach out. Hopefully I can assist you further down the road, and we can move on from there.
And there is going to be a survey. The last thing I'll say, there's a survey at the end of this. We would appreciate if you had filled out that survey, and we want to hear from you. What topics do you want to continue to have the conversation about as well? Thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoy your Friday. And again, just thank you for being a part of this discussion with us today. And thank you, Stacy, very
welcome.
much for
Enjoy
your
your
time.
Friday.
I truly appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.